What happens when Hollywood glamour collides with the dark underworld of organized crime? Movie stars graced magazine covers and lit up silver screens. Mobsters controlled unions, nightclubs, and even entire studios from smoke-filled back rooms. But what happened to those brave enough to say no to the most dangerous men in America? The price of defiance was steep, and for these 10 stars, it cost them everything. Which shocking case will make your blood run cold? Stay tuned to find out. 10. Lana Turner. She was Hollywood's ultimate glamour goddess, with hair like spun gold and a smile that lit up marquees across America. But behind Lana Turner's perfect image lurked a dangerous attraction to men with violent tendencies. None proved more lethal than Johnny Stompanato, the handsome enforcer for Los Angeles kingpin Mickey Cohen. Their romance blazed white-hot in 1957, filling gossip columns and thrilling fans who had no idea of the terror unfolding behind closed doors. Stompanato wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the mob's eyes and ears in Turner's luxurious world. When she tried to end things in April 1958, Stompanato exploded in rage, threatening to slice her famous face and destroy her career. What happened next shocked the nation. As he advanced toward Turner in her Beverly Hills bedroom, her 4-year-old daughter Cheryl grabbed a kitchen knife and plunged it into his stomach. He died instantly on the pink carpet of her bedroom, his blood staining the perfection of Hollywood's most elegant home. The subsequent inquest became the spectacle of the decade. Turner, trembling in a dark suit, testified through tears about his brutality while the city held its breath. Some whispered that she'd actually killed him herself, while others claimed Mickey Cohen had ordered the hit when Stompanato became too unpredictable. The ruling came back justifiable homicide, but nothing was ever truly settled. Turner's career never fully recovered from scandal. The message was clear. Even brushing against the mob's domain could leave permanent scars on the brightest of stars. Decades later, questions still swirl around what really happened that fateful night. Did a teenage girl really take down one of the most dangerous men in California? Or was it all an elaborate cover-up orchestrated by forces too powerful to name? Whatever the truth, one fact remains undisputed. When Lana Turner crossed the Mafia's path, she learned that in Hollywood, not all dangerous roles stay on the screen. 9. Thelma Todd. Before there was Marilyn, there was Thelma, the ice cream blonde, whose comedic timing made her a fortune, and whose beauty made her a legend. Thelma Todd conquered Hollywood in the early 1930s, sharing the screen with the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy, turning pratfalls into art and becoming one of the highest-paid actresses of her era. By 1935, she'd parlayed her success into a daring business venture, Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, a glamorous restaurant perched along the Pacific Coast Highway that attracted the cream of Hollywood society. What she didn't realize was that her dream business would become her nightmare. As her restaurant gained popularity, it caught the attention of Lucky Luciano, arguably the most powerful mobster in American history. Luciano saw Todd's establishment as the perfect front for an illegal gambling operation. But Todd, fiercely independent and unwilling to let criminals take over her legitimate business, refused him repeatedly. According to witnesses, during a heated argument at the Brown Derby, she famously told Luciano that a casino would open in her restaurant over my dead body. His chilling response, "That can be arranged." On the morning of December 16, 1935, Todd's maid made a grisly discovery. The actress was found slumped over the wheel of her Packard convertible in her garage, dead from carbon monoxide poisoning at just 29 years. The official ruling was accidental death. But the truth seemed painfully obvious to those who knew the circumstances. No pills in her stomach, despite fatal levels in her blood. Unexplained bruises on her throat and face. A woman deathly afraid of garages, who supposedly chose to sit in one. The investigation was suspiciously quick, with key witnesses never interviewed and evidence mishandled. Hollywood insiders knew that Todd had been threatened by gangsters weeks before her death. Many believe she was murdered on Luciano's orders. Her death started to look like an accident. As one mob researcher put it, Thelma Todd made the fatal mistake of saying no to men who never heard that word. Even 8 decades later, her beautiful face still haunts Hollywood, a reminder that in the battle between stardom and the syndicate, the mob rarely lost. 8. Marilyn Monroe. She remains the most iconic blonde who ever graced the silver screen. A woman whose whispered, "Happy birthday, Mr. President," still echoes through American mythology. But what if Marilyn Monroe's death wasn't the tragic overdose we've been told? What if her fatal mistake was getting caught between the most powerful forces in America? The Kennedys, the CIA, and the Mafia. By 1962, Monroe had become entangled in a dangerous web that connected Hollywood to Washington to organized crime. Her affairs with both John and Robert Kennedy had given her unprecedented access to state secrets and political scandals. Meanwhile, her friendship with Frank Sinatra brought her into the orbit of Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana, who had helped elect JFK only to find himself targeted by Robert Kennedy's Justice Department. She had become the ultimate liability, a beautiful woman with too many secrets who couldn't be controlled. According to her hairdresser, George Masters, Monroe spent her last night alive at Sinatra's Cal Neva Lodge with Giancana, who reportedly tried to convince her not to go public about her. The relationship with the Kennedys. Hours after returning to Los Angeles, she was dead. The official story claimed overdose, but the evidence never added up. There were no pills in her stomach, despite lethal levels in her bloodstream. No water glass to take the pills. Her body showed signs of having been moved. The phone records from that night mysteriously disappeared, as did her diary and other personal effects. Former medical examiner Thomas Noguchi noted the strange absence of pill residue in her digestive tract, leading some to believe the drugs were administered by enema or injection after her death. Was Monroe killed by the mob to strike at the Kennedys? Did government agents silence her to protect state secrets? Or was she the victim of a conspiracy between these forces, all seeking to bury what she knew? Whatever the truth, her death stands as Hollywood's most enduring mystery, a testament to what happens when a movie star steps into a real-life thriller she can't escape. 7. George Raft. He danced like a dream and lived like a nightmare. George Raft, with his slicked-back hair and dangerous smile, wasn't just playing gangsters in films like Scarface and Each Dawn I Die. He was living alongside them, walking a tightrope between Hollywood stardom and the criminal underworld that few actors have ever dared to attempt. Born in Hell's Kitchen to a family with mob connections, Raft never truly left that world behind, even as he became one of Warner Brothers' biggest stars. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, Raft maintained close friendships with notorious gangsters, including Bugsy, Siegel, and Meyer Lansky. These weren't casual acquaintances, they were intimate relationships that shaped his career. Studio executives trembled when Raft brought his associates to the lot, and directors learned to accommodate his schedule around mysterious meetings in Las Vegas and Havana. For years, this balancing act made him rich and powerful, with one foot in legitimate show business and the other in the shadows. But by the 1950s, the delicate dance became impossible to maintain. As the government intensified its crackdown on organized crime, Raft found himself increasingly isolated in Hollywood. Studios dropped him when his casino in Havana was seized during the Cuban Revolution, erasing millions in mob-connected investments. His friendship with Siegel became toxic after the mobster's bloody murder in Beverly Hills. The final blow came when Raft was denied entry to the UK because of his unsavory connections, effectively ending his international career. Raft died nearly broke in 1980s, having lost his fortune and his standing in the industry that once adored him. Unlike others on this list, he wasn't murdered, but he paid a different price. Watching his star power and wealth evaporate as the underworld connections that once fueled his rise ultimately engineered his fall. As he famously said, near the end of his life, "I'm the only one left, the only one who knows what it was really like." The man who had been too comfortable with killers discovered too late that in Hollywood, even the appearance of mob ties could be a career death sentence. 6. Bugsy Siegel. He wasn't a traditional movie star, but Benjamin Bugsy Siegel became as famous as any actor in Hollywood's golden age. With his matinee idol good looks and tailored suits, Siegel didn't just infiltrate Hollywood, he conquered it, transforming from Brooklyn hitman to Los Angeles socialite with unprecedented speed. While most gangsters operated from the shadows, Bugsy craved the spotlight, hosting lavish parties where studio heads mingled with movie stars, never quite acknowledging that their charming host had killed dozens of men with his own hands. By the mid-1940s, Siegel had achieved the impossible: genuine acceptance in Hollywood's elite circles. He dated actresses like Jean Harlow, befriended stars like George Raft and Gary Cooper, and was welcomed into the most exclusive homes in Beverly Hills. But his true ambition lay in the Nevada desert, where he envisioned a gambling paradise that would eclipse anything America had ever seen. Using millions in mob money, he built the Flamingo Hotel, determined to create a legacy beyond crime. The Flamingo's disastrous opening in December 1946 sealed Siegel's fate. As construction costs soared from $1 million to over $6 million, his mob partners became suspicious. Rumors spread that he was skimming money, embezzling funds to impress his Hollywood friends and his girlfriend, Virginia Hill. The man who had executed countless others for lesser offenses suddenly found himself in the crosshairs. On June 20, 1947, as Siegel relaxed in Virginia Hill's Beverly Hills living room, reading the Los Angeles Times, a barrage of bullets crashed through the window. He died instantly, his right eye blown completely out of its socket by the force of the gunfire. His death shocked Hollywood to its core, forcing the entertainment elite to confront the violence that lurked beneath their glamorous world. The message was unmistakable. Even a gangster as charming and connected as Bugsy Siegel wasn't immune to the mob's brutal justice when millions went missing. His blood-spattered corpse, photographed by police and splashed across newspapers nationwide, became Hollywood's most graphic reminder that no one crosses the syndicate and lives to tell about it. 5. Virginia Hill. They called her the Flamingo, a nod to her long legs and fiery temperament. Virginia Hill wasn't just another pretty face in a town full of beauties. She was organized crime's most valuable asset in Hollywood. A stunning woman with an extraordinary memory, who carried millions in mob cash across the country while gathering secrets that could destroy the powerful. As the longtime girlfriend of Bugsy Siegel, Hill had unprecedented access to both Hollywood royalty and the criminal elite, making her perhaps the most dangerous woman in America. Unlike the actresses who merely dated gangsters, Hill was an active participant in the mob's operations. She hosted parties where stars like Clark Gable and Betty Grable rubbed shoulders with Chicago outfit bosses. She delivered suitcases of cash to politicians. She remembered every conversation, every deal, every indiscretion. When Siegel was murdered in her Beverly Hills home in 1947, Hill wasn't just a grieving girlfriend. She was a liability with knowledge that could topple criminal empires. Hill fled to Europe after Siegel's murder, bouncing between Switzerland, Austria, and France, always looking over her shoulder. She testified before the Kefauver Committee on Organized Crime in 1951, somehow managing to reveal nothing despite hours of questioning. "I didn't know any gangsters," she famously claimed, despite having been intimately involved with the country's most notorious criminals. Her performance was so convincing that newspapers dubbed her the Queen of the Mobsters' Moles. In 1966, Hill's luck finally ran out. She was found dead in Austria, allegedly from an overdose of sleeping pills. But those who knew her best never believed the official story. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. The woman, who had miraculously kept mob secrets for decades, had apparently decided to end her life, just as federal investigators were closing in on her former associates. More likely, as one FBI agent later suggested, Virginia Hill finally became too expensive to maintain and too dangerous to ignore. Her death closed the book on one of Hollywood's most fascinating figures, a woman who danced between glamour and danger until her partners decided the music had to stop. 4. Paul Kelly. Before he became one of Hollywood's most respected character actors, Paul Kelly was known by his real name, Paul Michael Vaccarelli, a tough kid from the streets of New York, with connections to the city's most dangerous gangs. By the 1920s, he had reinvented himself as a rising star in silent films, carefully concealing his past from the Hollywood establishment. But the underworld has a long memory, and Kelly's attempt to escape his origins would lead to tragedy. As his fame grew, Kelly fell madly in love with Dorothy Mackay, the beautiful wife of actor Ray Raymond. Their affair became Hollywood's worst-kept secret, with Raymond reportedly receiving threatening messages warning him to step aside. When Raymond refused, he was brutally beaten in his own home, dying days later from his injuries. Kelly was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 1 to 10 years in San Quentin, effectively ending his rising career. What made the case explosive wasn't just the crime of passion, but the whispers that Kelly had called on his old underworld connections to intimidate Raymond before things escalated to violence. The trial revealed Kelly's hidden past, exposing the gangland ties he'd worked so hard to bury. Many believed mobsters had encouraged Kelly to handle Raymond, never expecting the confrontation would end in death. Remarkably, Kelly managed what few could. He returned from prison and scandal to rebuild his career, winning acclaim for performances in films like The Roaring Twenties, and eventually an Emmy Award for television work. But he never escaped the shadow of his conviction or the rumors about his true connections. Kelly's story stands as a rare example of someone who tangled with the mob, faced justice for his actions, and somehow emerged from the darkness to find redemption. For every Paul Kelly who survived crossing the line between Hollywood and the underworld, dozens of others weren't so lucky. 3. John Garfield. With his smoldering intensity and streetwise charm, John Garfield revolutionized what a leading man could be in 1940s Hollywood. Born Julius Garfinkel in New York's tough Lower East Side, Garfield brought an authenticity to roles in films like Body and Soul and Force of Evil that glamorous studio stars couldn't touch. His characters often stood up to corruption and exploitation, mirroring Garfield's own refusal to bow to power in real life. That principled stance would ultimately destroy him. Unlike many stars who played along with the mob to advance their careers, Garfield maintained a fierce independence. He openly criticized the studio system's ties to organized crime, particularly the mob's control of Hollywood labor unions. When gangsters approached him about using his production company for money laundering, Garfield not only refused but reported the encounter to federal authorities. This betrayal made him a marked man in circles, where loyalty was everything and cooperation was mandatory. Garfield's troubles multiplied when he was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee during the Red Scare. He refused to name names or denounce his progressive beliefs, leading to his blacklisting by the same studios that had profited from his talents. With his career in tatters, strange incidents began to plague him: threatening phone calls, break-ins at his home, and unexplained accidents on set during his few remaining projects. On May 21, 1952, Garfield was found dead in a friend's apartment at just 39 years old. The official cause was heart failure, but many questioned how a physically fit man in his prime could suddenly drop dead. Some noted that his medical files mysteriously disappeared after his death. Others pointed to reports that he had been meeting with federal prosecutors about organized crime in Hollywood just days before he died. As director Abraham Polanski later stated, "John died of a heart attack, but you have to understand what gave him the heart attack." Whether Garfield was murdered or hounded to his grave, the result was the same. Hollywood lost one of its most principled voices, and the message was sent that some powers cannot be challenged, even by the most beloved stars. 2. Dorothy Dandridge. She was breathtaking, talented, and utterly groundbreaking. Dorothy Dandridge shattered Hollywood's color barrier, becoming the first black woman nominated for the Best Actress Academy Award and forcing an industry built on segregation to acknowledge her undeniable star power. But as Dandridge climbed higher, she entered dangerous territory, crossing paths with the mobsters who controlled the Las Vegas venues where she performed and the men who saw her as property rather than talent. By the late 1950s, Dandridge was headlining at the Flamingo and the Riviera, Las Vegas establishments controlled by organized crime figures who dictated everything from performers' salaries to their personal lives. When she began a relationship with white restaurant owner Jack Dennison against the wishes of her mob-connected managers, threats began pouring in. Her dressing room was vandalized, bookings mysteriously disappeared. Notes were left warning her to stick with your own kind or else. Her marriage to Dennison proved disastrous, as he squandered her fortune and left her deeply in debt. Desperate for money, Dandridge considered writing a memoir that would expose the mob's control of the entertainment industry and their exploitation of black performers. According to friends, she had begun collecting evidence of financial skimming, prostitution rings, and civil rights violations in Las Vegas venues. She told her manager, "I have nothing left to lose by telling the truth." On September 8, 1965, just days after meeting with publishers about her explosive book project, Dandridge was found dead in her Hollywood apartment. The 42-year-old star had allegedly taken an overdose, but those closest to her immediately questioned this conclusion. Why would she kill herself when she had just landed a new film role and was excited about her memoir? Why were her financial records and personal notes missing from her apartment? Most suspiciously, why was her body discovered, meticulously laid out, fully made up in an expensive gown, as if staged for discovery? The investigation was cursory at best, with no serious consideration of foul play despite the suspicious circumstances. Her death was quickly ruled a self-inflicted, another beautiful black woman who supposedly couldn't handle the pressures of fame. But as civil rights activist and entertainer Eartha Kitt later remarked, Dorothy wasn't suicidal. Dorothy was dangerous to people who had secrets. Her groundbreaking career ended not with celebration, but with silence. Her final story left untold. 1. Judy Garland. The voice that sang "Over the Rainbow" was silenced decades too soon. Judy Garland, perhaps the greatest talent Hollywood ever produced, lived a life of extraordinary public triumph and private torment. Behind her magical performances lurked a dark reality. From childhood, Garland was controlled by powerful men who viewed her as an asset to be exploited rather than an artist to be protected. The most dangerous of these forces were the mob-connected studio executives who kept her dependent on the pills that would eventually kill her. MGM, Garland's home studio, maintained close ties to organized crime figures who supplied the amphetamines that kept their stars working inhuman hours and the barbiturates that helped them sleep. By the time she was 18, Garland was already addicted to both, trapped in a cycle of uppers and downers administered by the studio with chilling efficiency. When she attempted to break free from these chemical chains in the 1950s, she discovered how powerful her enemies truly were. After leaving MGM, Garland found that venues mysteriously canceled her bookings. Producers who expressed interest in her suddenly changed their minds. Her finances were sabotaged through fraudulent contracts, arranged by managers with mob ties. When she began speaking publicly about Hollywood's drug culture and the criminal elements controlling it, recording devices were discovered in her hotel rooms, and threatening calls became routine. On June 22, 1969, Garland was found dead in her London bathroom at just 47 years old. The official cause was an accidental overdose, the same drugs she had been fighting to escape for decades. But questions immediately arose. How did a woman who had been drug-free for months suddenly obtain and take a lethal dose? Why were key witnesses never interviewed? Why was evidence from her hotel room removed before police arrived? Most disturbing were the financial transactions discovered after her death. Millions had been siphoned from her accounts through shell companies linked to organized crime. Her attempts to audit these losses in the weeks before her death had triggered frantic meetings among her handlers. As her daughter, Liza Minnelli, later suggested, Mother knew where all the bodies were buried in Hollywood. She'd seen it all, and that made her dangerous to too many important people. Whether Garland's death was murder or the inevitable result of decades of systematic abuse, the outcome was the same. Hollywood's greatest voice was silenced, and those who had exploited her were free to craft the narrative of the tragic star who couldn't save herself. Hollywood's golden age shimmers with an irresistible glow that still captivates us decades later. But behind those iconic images lurked a shadow world where gangsters counted studio heads as partners and stars as pawns. The 10 legends we've explored today represent just a fraction of those who discovered too late that crossing the mob meant signing their own death warrants. What's most chilling isn't just how these stars died, but how thoroughly their true stories were buried. Studio publicity machines transformed murders into something else, mob vendettas into tragic accidents, and criminal conspiracies into personal failings. The question we're left with is disturbing. How many other Hollywood deaths have we accepted at face value that actually hide more sinister truths? Do you think today's celebrities face similar dangers from powerful hidden forces? Or are these dark connections a relic of Hollywood's past? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most frightening stories are the ones that happened when the cameras weren't rolling.